Hi, and welcome to Kidney Plugged In. March is Kidney Health Month in Canada. And if you haven't yet considered the way your mighty kidneys impact your overall health, well, now is the time. Kidneys are often misunderstood and their value to your overall health underestimated. Kidneys are vital organs with an important role, including removing waste from the body, helping to make red blood cells, and regulating blood pressure. Diabetes and high blood pressure are the leading causes of kidney disease, and for this reason, we are pleased to welcome Monique Leblanc on the show today. Monique is a dedicated peritoneal dialysis nurse educator who not only teaches patients about managing their dialysis treatment, but also offers a unique perspective from her own experience living with diabetes. She understands firsthand the challenges that come from living with a chronic condition. And she's with us today to talk about the two hats she wears as a peritoneal dialysis nurse and diabetes patient. So stay with us because we'll introduce you to Monique next, right here on Kidney Plugged In. Hi Monique, welcome to Plugged In. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Monique, can you take us back to the beginning of your journey? When and how were you first diagnosed with diabetes?
I was diagnosed when I was 13 years old. So almost 30 years ago now, and it was shocking. There's no one in my family with type 1 diabetes. I was kind of the first, and unfortunately the first. It was a big shock. I was in a small town where we didn't really have a lot of resources, so we got handed a lot of videos and pamphlets, and there wasn't the internet like there is now, so there wasn't a lot of support online in the 90s. I got diagnosed and ended up in hospital for 6 days before I was able to go home because I couldn't go home until I had the ability to do my own injections, and I was 13, and of course I was not going to let my mom do my injections for me. So I would go on day passes to school and had to spend the night there until I could manage my own injections.
Wow, what a shock that must have been for a 13-year-old. How did you feel when you were first diagnosed? Prior to the diagnosis, had you known anything about kidney disease?
I remember after being diagnosed having seen a commercial about it, but never really thought much about it. I didn't know anyone who was diabetic. So it was a surprise. I was very athletic. I was playing sports, and little bits I knew about diabetes was that it was, older people or, very different things. I was a kid, I didn't know.
And thinking back now that you've been on this journey for so long, were there any early symptoms that made you suspect that you might have diabetes?
I was pretty classic diagnosis, so it came on pretty quickly, and thankfully my mom was amazing and did some research on her own. So for me, it was within 2 weeks I had lost 15 pounds. I was drinking and drinking and drinking. I could not get enough fluids. I was so thirsty all the time. Not super hungry, but that's because my blood sugars were so high, I was just peeing it right back out. So I used to play sports, and I couldn't even make it through a whole baseball game without having to rush off to somewhere to find a bathroom, because everything that went in just went straight out. And so those were the big signs, is like the constant peeing and the weight loss.
A kidney health tip. Introducing more plant-based protein meals into your diet can help reduce kidney strain. Monique, for our viewers who aren't familiar with diabetes, can you pull back the covers and explain what diabetes is and share some of your personal experiences as a diabetic patient?
Type 1, you basically stop producing insulin. So you have to go on insulin injections. There is no pill for it. You can't just diet and exercise and keep it at bay. It just is insulin, that's it. Type 2 is a little different. Some people are fortunate enough they catch it early and they can adjust their diet, exercise, possibly lose weight if that's a factor for them, and they'll be able to control it. Not always though. Often people need pills or injectables, and often it progresses to the point of needing insulin as well. But they are very different types of diabetes. So type 1, your pancreas stops producing insulin. Essentially, there's more to it than that, but it stops producing. Whereas type 2, your body's still producing insulin, but maybe not enough, or your body can't utilize it well enough anymore. So then that's where the medications come in to try to help you produce more or use what you have more effectively.
Monique, can you share with us some of the experiences that you went through living with diabetes during your teen years? Are there any experiences that really stand out to you?
Some of the things that really would stand out in a negative light were being started on an insulin, being a teenager and not wanting to let anyone know that I'm doing insulin. So I gave a dose of it, went out, we were gonna go eat food, but we delayed, and so my insulin started working before we ate food, and I passed out and had a seizure in the middle of a store, and that spent my evening at the hospital. So things like that I was very fortunate I had good supports as a teenager, because you know you're invincible at some point. You think nothing will happen to you. So yeah, there was things like that. I've been fortunate I haven't really had any DKA or ketoacidosis that's put me in hospital, where a lot of diabetics do. There's been, over the years, it's sort of morphed and changed. When I was younger, I wasn't shy about it. I was very open about it. I always knew I wanted to get into healthcare too, so I was always very interested in the topic. But I also realized more recently that I kind of did myself and everyone a disservice by not talking about it. I was open about it, but I always brushed it off as like, no, I'm fine. And because I didn't want people commenting on what I was eating. I didn't want people commenting on what I was doing, like, oh, well, can you eat that? Can you do that? I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. So I brushed it off a lot and tried to pretend like I could do anything anyone else could. And for most things, I absolutely can. But there were times where I pushed through events where I shouldn't have, and allowed myself to get too low or get in a position where I may not have been safe because I didn't want to admit that I needed time to rest or things like that. So I've learned now as time's gone on that it's better to give a realistic picture of what it is for people, so that people know that it is an all-day, everyday problem. I downplayed it a lot for many years for many reasons, but I've now realized that it also minimized the work and the burden that it actually can be on a regular basis. So just been trying to be more open about it.
Yes, it's so important to have those conversations. Monique, you touched on something a little bit earlier when we talked about your support systems, and being diagnosed at 13, that would have primarily been your parents and your family. It must have been a huge learning curve for them as well.
Yeah, I think I recognize it a lot more now, and I've thanked my mom so many times as an adult, but as a kid, they are just like, stop bugging me. No, I don't have a headache because my blood sugar. It's like, just leave me alone. It's my toe hurts. It's fine. It's not my blood sugar. Stop asking me to check, or don't wake me up in the night to poke my finger, or, you know, it was such a nuisance at the time. But looking back, if I didn't have her, especially living in such a small town where there was no other resources, she did the research. And this was before the internet, before there was CGMs like Dexcom and Libre, before the technology. And so she was really spent the time reading the pamphlets that I tossed to the side, reading the books that I tossed to the side, watching the videos. And, you know, I'm sure her stress levels were a lot higher than she imagined they'd be already raising a teenager. Yeah, I think my mom was definitely the biggest support in all of that. My whole family was, but she was the one who took the brunt of it.
So speaking of that, the changes that you had to make, you know, what overall lifestyle changes have you sort of made over the years? If you can touch on some of those, you know, to adapt to having, you know, diabetes.
They've changed again, as always, and knowledge has changed over the years too. So lifestyle changes mainly are trying to increase activity, which we all know that activity and exercise is helpful, but it's not always so easy to incorporate, especially when you get busy and raising kids and working and all that. It gets very tricky to fit everything in, but Yeah, trying to park a little further, walk a little bit more at work, add in some exercise where I can, trying to be more mindful and aware of what I eat and when I eat it, because having something higher carb at a different time of day will affect me a lot more than another. So I tend to be more insulin resistant at different times of the day, so going for a walk and having a small meal in the morning works really well for me, whereas if I go for a walk in the evening and have that same meal, I will get lows unless I adjust insulin. So it's been a learning curve for a lot of reasons. It took me a while to get to the point where I was comfortable exercising too, because if you don't adjust properly, you get lows. I know there's a lot of diabetics I've talked to where the fear of hypoglycemia or low blood sugars is so real that people avoid scenarios that will cause low blood sugars. So exercise or taking medications or higher doses of medications, which are actually needed, but that fear of lows, because it's such a powerless feeling where you can lose consciousness, have seizures like I said I did as a teenager. It's a constant balancing act.
It's going to be challenging at times.
It is, yeah. And there's the stress of the illness itself, and then there's all the added things of life, right? There's hormone changes, there's raising kids, there's working, there's having fun, there's just all the normal parts of life. And then you factor in all that extra stuff you have to think of, because I don't just get in my car and go. I don't just go out for a meal. I don't just go out for a walk. I have a big bag with me everywhere I go. I always have sugar on me. I always have extra pump supplies for my insulin pump, because what if it fails? And it has failed. Well, I'm out for dinner with family and suddenly I'm sitting there and have no way to give myself insulin had I not had that extra kit with me. You don't just get up and go and do things like the people around you. So when someone says, oh, why don't we just run out here and we'll go to the park, or we'll go to whatever it is that, just run around and do something extra. It's like, I'll get low walking around Costco if I don't adjust first. I have to plan like an hour in advance to make sure that I don't get low in Costco. My first ever low was in Costco when I was a kid. I've had multiple since. It's the weirdest thing, but it's just a lot more walking than you think. And if you don't plan ahead for it, if your blood sugars are good, it can tip very quickly.
A kidney health tip. Low sodium is key to a kidney-friendly diet. So if you're using canned beans or vegetables, rinse them to remove excess salt. You wear two hats simultaneously because you're a peritoneal dialysis nurse, right? So for all of our viewers that aren't acquainted with what PD, can you explain what's meant by being on PD and a PD nurse?
So peritoneal dialysis, or PD, is a type of dialysis where we use a sugar-based fluid, so usually dextrose, and the sugar this fluid is placed in the abdomen through a tube that's surgically placed. What I do is I teach people how to exchange out the old fluid, replace the new. So the idea is they put in this nice fresh fluid, it sits in their abdomen up against this peritoneal membrane, and it helps to pull the waste and extra water, potassium out of the blood. And then a few hours later, whatever has been decided with the team, they connect again, they drain out the old fluid with the waste, refresh with new fluid. That would be manually, or the alternate way of doing it is with a cycler or a machine that they connect to every night, and the machine drains and refills them and then lets it dwell, drains, refills, dwells multiple times while they sleep. And so it's a way of cleaning the blood in a different way rather than the kidneys, because by the time someone needs dialysis, their kidneys aren't filtering properly. Might be filtering water, but maybe very little waste, or a little bit of waste and very little water. It just depends on each individual. So my job as a PD nurse is to teach people how to do the treatment itself and how to prevent infections, what to do if there's a problem, who to call if there is a problem, and then supporting people throughout that journey. So usually we set them free when they're all educated, and we check in with them at clinics with their doctor and the whole team, and we're there for them if they have questions in between or problems. And we do a lot of problem solving over the phone, actually, because PD nurses cover quite a large area, right? So patients might be live hours away from their unit, so we do a lot of problem solving over the phone.
So for a patient, a CKD patient that's really just beginning their journey, they've been diagnosed with kidney disease, right? How would they get to be on peritoneal dialysis?
So usually that conversation starts with their nephrologist in their office or in the kidney care team, if that's where they're coming from. So they will have usually an options class in our area anyway. I can't speak for every area, but typically they would be notified of all the possible options that they have and what goes into that. So they would be notified of peritoneal dialysis if it's an appropriate choice for them, hemodialysis or transplant, or sometimes conservative care. So there's lots of the variety of options based on the individual situation. Peritoneal dialysis is great for a lot of reasons, but there's always reasons why it's not good for everyone. Same with hemodialysis, same with transplant. So they go over all the possibilities, and if at that end they decide, you know what, this person might be really good with peritoneal dialysis, or they're interested and they want to know more, then they would get referred over to us at the clinic, and we would meet with them and do an orientation. We show them the equipment, we go over, this is what you can expect, this is what you would see in the home, these are the types of appointments, this is the training you would get. So we give them a broad picture of everything, or as much as we can, that they would be experiencing if they were to end up on peritoneal dialysis at some point. So our program, we try to see them early. I don't want to wait until someone needs it now, because there's a lot of pre-planning that happens, and no one likes to be shocked and thrown in. So we try to see people while they're still feeling relatively well before we get there. So we try to see people before they need it, so it's not a panic.
A kidney health tip. Those with low mobility due to kidney disease and other conditions can do chair exercises to help build strength and flexibility, helping to manage symptoms and prevent complications. As we know, there is no cure for kidney disease. There are different treatments, and dialysis is one of them, but there's several forms of dialysis. Can you elaborate? Can you tell us a little bit more?
Yeah. So there's peritoneal dialysis, which I have described already there. So that one is done at home. That's why people tend to like that one. It's not for everyone, but a lot of people who come to PD do like the freedom, the flexibility, the little bit more control, because it's in their own environment. They can travel more easily or easier than other modalities in some ways, because the machine's portable, the equipment's portable, the company works with them to deliver to other countries even. So there's options for travel, which people like. There's hemodialysis, which it depends on the situation, but most people do it either in hospital or in a community setting where they come in and the nurses will hook them up and do their treatment. And when I say hook them up, it'll be to either a fistula, which is in the arm somewhere that's been surgically placed, or they'll have a perm cath, which is a tube in the chest. And ultimately what happens is they're connected to a machine. A small part of their blood is brought out of their body through a filter, cleaned, and put back. And it continuously does that for usually around 4 hours at a time, typically 3 times a week, depending on the scenario. There's another way of doing hemodialysis that some people choose to do, which is home hemodialysis. So they would do the same treatment, but it would be set up in their home. And they would receive all the training they require, they would get all the help they need, all the supplies would be delivered to their home. And so that's not for everybody either, but there's pros and cons to all of those. And then the next option is transplant, which of course most people would prefer to have a transplant, but again, not everyone qualifies, and it does take time to get there, right? They have to make sure you're healthy enough to have the kidney. They have to find a donor. So that is definitely a treatment that most people are aiming towards if they qualify. But again, it's another type of treatment that would get people off of dialysis, but it is still classed as a treatment, not a cure.
A kidney health tip. Stress can lead to high blood pressure, which can worsen existing kidney conditions. So learn to unwind, maybe with a yoga class. As you know, diabetes is one of the leading causes of kidney disease. Many patients have both, right? Kidney disease and diabetes, so they're living with two chronic illnesses. Can you talk about some of those challenges of somebody that would have both kidney disease and diabetes?
It's complicated, and I've been working behind the scenes trying to uncomplicate that as best I can, but the best way I could describe it is someone's already dealing with the chronic illness, right? They're already dealing with diabetes, and like I mentioned earlier, it's a constant, you're constantly thinking about it. It's constantly in your mind, you're constantly on that, you're constantly balancing it, right? You're on that teeter-totter, balancing it out. So when people come to us and they're already trying to manage their diabetes and then they suddenly have kidney problems or dialysis, they get this extra level, right? This extra layer of burden, if you will. And unfortunately, one affects the other. So if your diabetes can cause the kidney failure, which we do see, unfortunately. I think the stats are like 40 to 50%, depending on which stats you look at, of dialysis patients have diabetes, unfortunately. What I see when people come to us with diabetes, what we hear all the time is, well, what can I eat? All right, so we have a dietitian on our team because of that. We have a team of people. It's not just we teach them how to do their treatment. We help guide them through the complicated path.
As a PD nurse who is living with diabetes, I would imagine that this gives you a unique insight into the challenges that a diabetic kidney patient might face.
Yeah, I think it makes me relate a little more. Not that I have kidney failure, but the risk is always there, given that I'm diabetic and have been for almost 30 years. And I know the stats, so the chances of me having kidney failure are higher. So, I've got that piece that I can relate. And I can relate to the mental exhaustion and the burden of always thinking about it. And, you add on this extra layer, whether they're diabetic or not, there's just that extra level of burden and fear and doubt. So there's a lot of levels. It's not just you have kidney failure or kidney issues and here, do this treatment or here, take this medicine. There's so many layers to it in terms of accepting it or not accepting it, and how do you navigate every aspect of it while having a tube in your body and having suddenly a bunch of supplies at your home potentially if you're doing PD, or there's you unearth lots of levels. It affects couples, right? You've got someone who was very active and now they're not very active anymore because they've got so much fatigue from the kidney disease and anemia and whatnot. And the other person isn't maybe recognizing that they look okay. They don't look like they're tired or unwell, but they're telling them, I'm really tired. So I've seen, sometimes arguments between couples even, where it's like, well, he just sits around. It's like, well, yeah, because he's really ill actually at this moment, but we're working on it. So yeah, it's not even just the person, it's the family members, it's the caregivers, it's the the kids, whoever is involved, they all have their own fears and doubts and worries as well. And so a lot of what we do isn't just teaching someone how to do their treatment, it's navigating how it's going to work in their real life. Not just, here, you need to do this, this is the prescription, and go. It's a lot of helping them figure out what their new normal is for that time.
A kidney health tip. Cardio fitness is important for people with kidney disease. It improves heart health, circulation, and overall kidney function. Monique, do you have any final thoughts or words of wisdom to share with our viewers who perhaps are just at the beginning of their journey, having recently been diagnosed with either diabetes or kidney disease?
I think the biggest things would be, start small. Don't think you have to know everything right off the bat. Don't think that everything's going to be exactly as expected right off the bat. Give yourself some grace, give yourself some patience. It is a long road ahead, but that doesn't mean that you can't make it. Find the things that you love, don't lose who you are, ask for help, and don't beat yourself up over the bad days, because everyone has bad days. You can't avoid them. I've said to people many times, have your pity party, just don't live there, right? Have it and get it out, pull yourself up and move on, because tomorrow's a new day. The next meal's another meal, the next scenario's a different scenario, so don't get hung up on what didn't work and keep moving forward and find something that does work the next time.
A kidney health tip. Those living with kidney disease can benefit from adding more movement to their day, but getting started and staying consistent can be challenging. Joining a walking group can provide support and motivation. For more information on walking to wellness, visit thekidneywellnesshub.ca.